This took place when I was around 6 or 7. My parents were out late at a bar. My older sister, who was around 14 to 15 at the time, was watching me. We were in the living room watching TV, and it was fairly late, around 10 to 11 p.m. We had lived in a nice neighborhood at the time. Police never had to come or deal with lots of issues. It was low crime rate and great schools. We were both dozing off when suddenly it sounded like somebody was trying to aggressively open our door, like as if someone was being chased and they were desperate for shelter. Pounding on the glass, jiggling the doorknob, and ringing the doorbell all at the same time, and very aggressively. It lasted for about 10 to 15 seconds, and then it stopped abruptly. My sister made me go to the front door and see if it was our mom or dad, possibly drunk, coming home. It wasn't. There was no one there when I checked. Freaking out, we called our parents, who were only a little concerned but said they were on their way. I remember us running upstairs and locking ourselves in my room since my downstairs floor was full of giant windows that we'd left the curtains open to. 15 minutes later, it happened again. Pounding on the door, trying the doorknob, and non-stop rapidly ringing of the doorbell. I was hoping that it was a ding-dong ditcher the first time, but twice? I feel like you wouldn't want to go back to the home in fear of the cops being called on you, or having someone looking out for you. I don't know though. My sister called my parents yet again, who were still on their way home. We were both way too terrified to check the door. It stopped abruptly yet again. I don't know why my sister didn't just call the cops herself. My parents finally got home. They still didn't know if it was worth calling the cops or not, in fear of it ending up just being a waste of time. Obviously, my parents aren't very smart, I know, and since they weren't there, they didn't hear how crazy it sounded. It wasn't just a knock and a doorbell ring. Whoever was on the other side of that door was putting what sounded like all of their strength into trying to get into our house. We all eventually just went to bed, my mom reassuring us that it wouldn't happen again. 3 a.m. rolls around, and obviously it happens again. This time was the most aggressive. My mom screamed at my dad to call 911, which he did do while running down the stairs to see who it was. Then it stopped. My dad got to the door about 5 seconds after it stopped, and again, nobody was there. The cops patrolled our house that night and drove around the neighborhood for a few days after those incidents. From what I know, nobody else had reported something like this happening to them in our neighborhood. I still don't know what it could have been about. I've always told myself it was just some kids messing with us, but the fact that it happened multiple times and so aggressively really disturbs me. I had some trouble sleeping in that house for months. If you wanted a ding-dong ditch, why would you try to open the door relentlessly? And why target the same house 3 times? That just seems like a lot. God knows what would have happened if the door was unlocked. We were little girls, and we definitely wouldn't have been able to defend ourselves had it been malicious. Our cars were broken into just a few months after this, so it's very possible that it could have been related. I'll never really know, but whether it was innocent or not, whoever it was that desperately wanted to get into our house that night, I want to thank you for the lifelong trauma of being home alone. Thanks for that. My house is weird, and that we have skylights in the living room. And this is the weird part. The bathroom as well, which is also a big issue. We've caught a drone, one with a camera hovering over them for an extended period of time. A lot of the time being when I'm in the house alone, even at times when I'd just gotten out of the shower. We aren't sure though whether they're actually watching me then, but we hope not. There's been a lot of strange happenings around my house over the past few years, ever since October of 2020. Not supernaturally strange. That wouldn't quite be so scary. After all, humans can be far more cruel than any ghost or ghoul. One night though, someone had snuck up to put a note by our door. The note was essentially telling us to get rid of Guillermo, our pit bull who's somewhat of a watchdog. He stopped a lot of bad things from escalating. Another night, we caught someone creeping around our house and looking through our windows. We suspect that it's been one person that's doing all this, because it seems a bit strange that all of this suddenly started happening after years of being in our house with nothing strange happening. My parents have been particularly concerned about my safety in all of this, thinking that someone might be targeting or watching me. I remember thinking when they told me this, great, I just love being a teenage girl. This all leads up to about a year ago, when I was home with nobody else except for my father, who was in his room. I was laying in the living room on the couch, and I was faced away from the front door, which was right behind me. I was cuddling with my dogs and listening to scary stories, which is sort of funny considering what happened, and at the time, I was planning on taking a nap. Aside from the voice of the narrator on the TV and the soft sound of my dog's breathing, it was quiet, and then it happened. Suddenly, I heard the moaning of the hinges of the glass door then opening as my dogs then lunged off the sofa. Guillermo was jumping at the door now excitedly and barking, sounding nearly vicious. I heard the actual door being twisted open behind me as I was faced away, assuming it was one of my family members just coming home. Roxy, who's the other dog, a blue heeler, had returned to my side and began cowering by my feet. She's a very anxious dog. This wasn't out of the ordinary at all, so I didn't even question it. Not until I realized that nobody was actually coming into our house. About 40 seconds went by, but I didn't once see or hear the voices of my siblings or mother. I remember thinking how weird that was. They would have usually greeted me, or I would have at least seen them walking past me into the house. But no. Guillermo was still sitting at the door, and when I turned around to look, there was no one there. Not my brother, not my sister, and not my mom. No one. Finally, I stood up, going to check out my brother's room to check if he was home. Nope. So I went to my parents' room right next to it, wanting to see if my mother came home. Nope. But my father was still sat right there. So I asked him, "Hey Dad, did you hear the door opening?" He looked up at me, looking slightly confused. "Yeah, wasn't that you?" "No, I thought Mom or Beth came home," I told him. I was feeling sort of nervous now. "Your mother doesn't get off until 9:30, and your sister's staying at Tim's," he told me. Tim is my sister's boyfriend, by the way, but my brother was clearly not home. The bathroom was empty, and he wasn't in his room. So who, I wondered, opened the door? Did it really even open at all? "Dad, can you come to the door with me?" I asked him anxiously. He was clearly concerned by the situation. We were always so vigilant about locking the door. Nobody but our family should have been able to just get in. But we both heard the door opening clear as day, and we were still the only two people at home. So what happened? My father led the way, with me trailing close behind. We went down the short hallway and right into the living room. We noticed quickly, as we approached the door, that it was slightly ajar. Someone had opened it. We knew that it was closed before. I heard the doorknob twist when it opened. Someone tried to get into our house while I was sitting right there. We learned later on that when my brother came home, he forgot to lock the door behind him when he left. But it was still strange. The one time we left the door unlocked, someone tried to break in. There's been a few more instances of someone creeping around our house, and also us seeing the same drone since then. Recently, a guy came up to our house in the middle of the night, and when my dad confronted him, he asked if he could take Guillermo for a walk. We very obviously didn't let him. We're still very suspicious of him. Nothing happened again with someone trying to get in, but we've still been cautious. We keep a closer eye on our dogs whenever they go out. We always double check the locks, and we now have blurring sheets on our skylights, and we're going to be getting cameras soon as well. There's nothing about my family in specific that made any of this happen. We are, for the most part, very normal, just like any other household. This sort of thing can really happen to anyone. People can be awful, and while it's awful to think about, you really aren't safe from things like that. So please be careful. Hey everyone, I need to take a small break from the stories to thank today's sponsor, HelloFresh. With HelloFresh, you get farm-fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. HelloFresh does more than just delicious dinners. Not only can you take your pick from 40 weekly recipes, but you can also choose from over 100 items to round out your order, from snacks and easy lunches to desserts and pantry necessities. Everything arrives in one box on a delivery day that you choose. And no worries if you're not a pro in the kitchen. HelloFresh's foolproof recipes arrive pre-portioned and they're easy to prepare in just a few steps. I like HelloFresh personally because it makes things so much easier, especially on those nights when I just don't know what to make. And with their variety of recipes, you never have any trouble figuring out something to eat. Go to HelloFresh.com/Cannibal16 and use code Cannibal16 for 16 free meals plus free shipping. That's HelloFresh.com/Cannibal16 and use code Cannibal16 for 16 free meals plus free shipping. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. This event happened to me about a month ago. I was meeting up with my ex-girlfriend for my 17th birthday, and we were having a good time just driving around and rebonding, just catching up with each other. We decided to go to her house to hang out since she was home alone, but I'll let it be known now that she doesn't live in the best area, and it's known for being in the hood, I guess you can say. So we're just laying down together watching the show Catfish, when we then heard the door then aggressively open. We just assumed it was her sister coming home from work or something, but then we heard a lot of noise coming from the living room. I just slightly opened the door, and I saw 2 guys wearing masks just walking around the house, so I slightly closed the door so they wouldn't hear us. I told my ex what was going on, and she panicked, which then led to the guys rushing to the room. They started pounding on the door, then saying, "Open the fucking door!" Luckily, I had locked it just in time. They tried knocking down the door, screaming and going apeshit crazy. I had to think fast, so I then had my ex and I then escape through her bedroom window. We started booking it, running like our lives depended on it, while also pulling out a phone to call 911. We stayed away from the house, but just far enough to still be able to keep an eye on it for when the cops would arrive. After the cops got there, we went to the house to talk to the officers. But what do you know? The intruders were long gone at that point, but they did find a pocket knife left on the floor, and some duct tape as well. I'm really glad my ex and I got out of there when we did, because I really have no clue what those guys would have done to us. I'd like to end this story with a big fuck you to the bitch-ass intruders who did all this. Thank you for ruining my birthday and robbing my ex's house and her family. Sooner or later, you broke-ass bitches are gonna end up in jail, or worse, so I really hope it was worth it. The story took place last summer when I was 17 years old. My boyfriend, who we'll call E, asked me to hang out while he was babysitting his little brother, who we'll call A. Over the summer, A's mom and stepdad had date nights somewhat frequently, and I came over a lot to help and hang out. This was done with no worries, as although we lived in a very nice area by the beach, we lived in one of the safer areas in the community. They left at 5:30 p.m., and for the first few hours, it was pretty uneventful. Me and E made dinner, we all ate, played a few board games, watched some cartoons, and then we put A to bed by 8. After that, me and E were cuddled up on the couch watching some TV. Right at around 9, E had a sudden craving for frozen yogurt, which didn't really surprise me, as it was his favorite dessert. We didn't want to wake up his brother, so I agreed to stay while he went to go get us some. I knew it was going to take him about 20 to 30 minutes round trip, as he would have to go down more towards the beach. About 5 minutes after he left, I had heard a knock on the door. As I was walking up to the door, I had heard a man's voice then shout, "Hey, I got a pizza here!" He had a friendly tone, but I didn't want to open the door as I knew the pizza wasn't ordered. I went to the little library/office area of the house, which also had a window facing the front door. Very carefully, I peeped out the window. Looking out to the street, I saw no car with any type of pizza logo. What was worse was the fact that the man wasn't even holding anything. I had no intentions of finding out what this sketchy dude wanted, especially with a 6-year-old child in the house. So I decided to just wait it out, figuring that he wouldn't want to stay there forever. Not even 5 minutes go by, and I started to hear movement. I was getting more irritated than scared, ready to deal with this creep. However, I became a lot more nervous as I then saw the man sneaking into the backyard, and now a sense of realness coming over me. Before calling the police, I had messaged my boyfriend, only to find out that he had conveniently left his phone on the couch. I quickly called 911, running down the hall to A's room, before then pausing for a brief second. While giving 911 the address and the situation, I ran back 2 doors to E's room to get an aluminum baseball bat that he had. Usually I wouldn't be too worried about defending myself. At my high school, I'm on the wrestling team, and I also frequent the gym, so I can definitely say that I'm stronger than most teenage girls, but I knew that a weapon was going to serve a lot better defense. As I quietly crept back to A's room, I heard the last thing that I wanted to hear. You see, all of the entrances at my boyfriend's house has those coded locks. It made a specific beeping sound when the correct code was punched. Imagine my surprise and horror when I then heard that exact sound. I then hauled ass to A's room, quietly shutting and locking his door in an attempt not to wake him up. I felt helpless, as all I could really do was notify 911 about what happened and just sit against the door. I could now hear this man wandering throughout the house and then walking into different rooms. I silently prayed that either E or the police would come before he came around to A's door. Unfortunately, the man wasted no time, and I then heard the doorknob then begin rattling. Although it was slightly muffled, I could hear the man say, "I know that there's a pretty girl in there." After no response, he began banging on the door like a maniac. The operator told me to sit tight as the police were almost there. Of course, A woke up and I then rushed to him, desperately telling him to keep quiet. Fortunately, he did as I asked, although it didn't surprise me, as he was always a quiet kid, never really fussy or super loud. The man kept banging on the door, even shouting to let him in, and that I'm going to regret not opening the door. A hugged me tightly, and I hugged him back, not knowing if I was serving him more comfort or vice versa. After what felt like my whole life and back, the police made their way into the house. I could hear the man struggling as they arrested him, and an officer then telling us it was safe to come out. I told A that I was super proud of him for how he handled the situation, carrying him out while unlocking the door. We walked out to the front yard, and the first thing I saw was E talking to another officer. He saw us, and he immediately hugged both of us, then causing me to almost topple over. He was bombarding the both of us with kisses, while repeating, "Thank God," which made me feel a whole lot better. The officer pulled me aside for questioning, and E called both his mom and mine as well. The whole situation was a bit of a blur, but apparently E's stepdad identified the man as his coworker. They work in home security, which explains how he was able to unlock the door. He refused to reveal his motives to the police, but in all honesty, I had no interest in even knowing. Both my parents and E's pressed charges, and I know I won't ever have to deal with that creep ever again. I'm really happy to say that me and E are still together. We're going to be moving into an apartment in the fall, as both of the universities we're attending are actually in the same state. Fortunately, A doesn't remember much from that night. Although I don't let that night haunt me, I will definitely never forget it. Hey everyone, I hope you all enjoyed these stories. If you ever want to submit your own, you can do so at southerncannibal.com. Have a good night everyone, and remember to always stay